Hi, I'm Dave Bundy, editor of the Lincoln Journal-Star, and this is the editorial endorsement interview with Trevin Preble, who is the Lancaster County candidate for Lancaster County Public Defender. So, Trevin, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with this editorial board interview. Before you do lots of talking, we'll have Kent do a little talking and say who he is.
I'm Kent Walgamot. I write about arts and entertainment for the paper, and I have been on the editorial board for more than a decade.
And I have a well-planned list of questions, Trevin, and then Kent jumps in and throws everything off with the occasional follow-up. But
Sounds good.
He's not trouble or anything. So, all right. Well, the first question. This is an elected position. It's a position of public service. In this day and age, that doesn't look like fun all the time to put yourself out in front of the electorate. So why do you want to be the public defender, and what experiences and attributes do you have that suit you for this office?
Well, first, thank you guys for taking the time to interview me. I really do appreciate it. So to answer your question, I was born and raised here in Lincoln. I graduated from Northeast High School. I obtained my undergraduate degree in business management from Doane College. I worked for several large insurance companies and a tuition management company here in Lincoln. And I always wanted to be a lawyer, but thought that was impossible, especially when my wife, who is then my girlfriend, became pregnant with our oldest son when I was a senior in high school. When I was with the support of my wife, I was able to go back to law school here at UNL. After graduation, I had received several offers to work at some large insurance companies here, but I knew that I wanted to make a difference and help people, and I was drawn to criminal defense. I have a strong belief in the Constitution and the promises that it holds. I also started my own firm because that is where I knew that I could help the most people directly. So when I was in the corporate world, I supervised and managed teams. Over the years, I've directly or indirectly supervised over 100 individuals. I've conducted hundreds of interviews with potential employees. I've written hundreds of performance reviews. I've managed budgets, staffing levels, salary management. I've coached employees on performance management. I've sat across the table from employees and had to terminate their employment when it wasn't a good fit with the company or the job. And I was successful in keeping and raising employee engagement year after year. As an attorney, I've practiced extensively in the areas of criminal and family law. I accept court appointments, and what that means is that I take cases that the public defender's office cannot handle either due to conflicts that they have or excessive caseloads. These are the exact same cases that the public defender's office has. The only difference is that I have to find other ways to connect my clients to resources that the public defenders already have that are readily available to them. They have social workers, some investigators in their office. I don't have access to that, so I have to do some of that stuff myself. I currently have over 75 cases that have been assigned to me that the public defender couldn't handle. And those range from DUI to homicide cases. And those I've been appointed to by our local judges. To kind of wrap around to the first question, I think the reason I'm running is that I saw an office that was void of leadership with employees who appeared to be lost and disengaged. And I knew that my experience leading dynamic and engaged teams could make a difference to those that work there. And ultimately, I think to the individuals that office serves. The individuals that work at the Lancaster County Public Defender's Office are some of the most knowledgeable and seasoned defense attorneys in the state of Nebraska. And I think the office as of late has lost some respect, but I believe this is due to lack of an effective leader being in place. And I know that I have the experience and the ability, both from a legal perspective, but also from a management perspective, to give support to the staff and help them provide the best legal representation to the people that office serves.
Okay, so how do we make the justice system work better for everyone in the community, or do you feel like, it's working now?
Good question. I think there are always ways that we can make the system work better. I think, during this, especially this election season, there's been a lot of talk about laws that are in place and should they be prosecuted, or for example, the bond system that we have in place. And I guess I want to be clear, the office is about providing the best representation for the clients it serves. We have a legislature that makes laws. We have judges that determine bond amounts. To be clear, for example, under our current bond system, Nebraska Revised Statute 29901, any bailable defendant shall be released on a personal recognizance bond, is what that statute says. So there is no bond set unless there are specific reasons found by a judge. What those reasons essentially boil down to is if they will show up for court and whether their release would jeopardize the safety of witnesses or others in the community. So those are areas where there's, like I said, been a lot of talk, areas that this office can have a direct impact on in regards of the deployment of the resources that it has. For example, to help with this issue would be there are 2 social workers who are currently employed by the Public Defender's Office. Right now, they are currently geared toward trying to decrease sentences of those who have been convicted or pled to crimes. And from my experience, our judges are pretty consistent on the sentences they hand down. The number one thing that a client can do to impact that sentence is to get a job, number one. And if they have any trouble with mental health issues or drugs and alcohol, they need to get themselves treatment or help. My focus would be on the people who are first entering the criminal justice system, who either have mental health issues or drug and alcohol problems. As their attorney, we know them better than anyone else in the system, better than the police, better than the county attorney, better than the judges. And so we need to identify, I think, those individuals early on who would benefit from either mental health help or substance abuse treatment, and focus those resources towards that area. A vast majority of my indigent clients are arrested or live in the downtown core area, and I think that bears out in the statistics that we see from LPD. I would, again, redeploy those social workers to have them work with local organizations, I think like Centerpoint, Touchstone, and maybe even reach out to some churches in the downtown core area that would connect clients to resources. Many of these people have no one to help them. They have no one to turn to. Most of the time, they need someone to talk through what they're going to do, how they're going to proceed. For example, I had a client who was placed on mental health diversion in the 3 hours after she got out of jail. She was back in again because she had obtained some illegal controlled substances. She came here from Alaska with some family members. Those family members left. She was the only one here. She had no family, no friends, no one to help her. And I think if someone could have just sat down with her, helped her put together a plan, just even for that day, where is she going to sleep that night? What are you going to do the next day to, maybe start looking for a job, or where are we going to go to sign up for some services? I think that could have helped her be successful. And I think there are people and organizations that want to help. And I know that this office can make that match. I think we can look at some of our current diversion and problem solving courts. This is an area where I would focus efforts to work with the county attorney, I think the county board and other stakeholders to expand eligibility for those programs. Right now, they're pretty tight, and I understand the reasons why for that. But I think that, if we can get some numbers around, if we were to let some other individuals into the program, would we see more success in some of the areas of those programs?
Well, you covered a lot of ground with that answer, so you may have covered this next question. but there may be other avenues you want to go down. But the state's corrections crisis begins with law enforcement and begins in courtrooms. There have been efforts made at criminal justice reform that haven't really gotten anywhere. You point out rightly, it's the legislature, it's judges, it's county attorneys making decisions. But as a public defender, what role would you like to play? What role do you see yourself being able to play in improving any aspect of that system?
Yeah, so this is one that I've touched on quite a bit when I've gone and talked to voters. I think the first thing, and I think you kind of touched on a little bit, is we have to dispel some of the myths I think that are out there. We see people charged with a felony, and that's due to the state law that the unicameral has put into place. We don't see people, in my experience, with residue amounts of methamphetamine or small amounts of methamphetamine go to prison. Even if it's the 8th time, we'll see them go to jail, not prison. So we have to look at who is in the prisons and I think what they're there for. And again, this is something I think that the legislature needs to look at. And I would be happy to provide my input along with those who work for me for the legislature to consider. I think the idea that we must pass, kind of like you said, every part of a criminal reform bill that's been proposed versus the 8 of the 10 areas that we could agree on doesn't make a lot of sense. And again, I think this is something that the people need to demand from their legislators. But in a much broader sense, this is something, I guess, as a society that we need to decide, are we going to build prisons or are we going to pay for some early intervention for individuals? As a society, when I've talked to individuals, they don't want to spend money on mental health care or on drug and alcohol help for people. When I talk about expanding those programs or spending that money, they're very skeptical. They just hear spend money. And I think generally what I end up having to do is explain to them that it's far less expensive for us to tackle those issues with individuals early rather than incarcerating them down the road. In business, we talk about spending money to make money. And the same applies in this area, but instead of making money, we're actually saving money. And beyond the money, I think that we save is the impact that we're getting when we are able to help people with their lives, and not only their lives, but their families, parents, children, siblings. It'll have a direct impact on all of those individuals. Plus, I think as a society, the citizenry, I can tell you that in all of the thousands of cases that I've had over the years, I can say that when I've looked at somebody who's been charged with a much higher level of felony, and I look at their background and I look at their criminal history, there's almost always some sort of mental health issue or substance abuse issue that if we would have been able to tackle that early on, we might not be sitting there in court today. So I think this really comes down to the question that society needs to answer. Generally, though, the legislature. I will say, if elected, I, along with my office, will do everything we can to help people get out of the revolving door of the criminal justice system.
All right. Are there any, well, Kent, have you got, we're getting close to the end of our questions here, Trevin. So I'm going to let Kent jump in with his, whatever he's got here.
Have you mentioned when you were talking about being court appointed that the current county attorney staff has plenty of caseload, shall we say? Have you looked at the staffing? Do you see a need for additional attorneys or support staff or anything? For any reason, whether it to be simply to be able to do that without having to have a bunch of people like you in being the court appointed, or also, any other reason, I guess.
Yeah, I think as I look at some of this is anecdotal from my experience. I think there's probably an opportunity to add one more or maybe even two, depending on the numbers, in either the felony or the misdemeanor division. I will tell you that it tends to be around somewhere around the 23rd of the month that we'll start getting criminal appointments. And the reason, every time that the public defender's office conflicts out of a case, they state what the reason is. And usually it's around the 20-something of the month that we'll see that it's due to caseload status. And so I think looking at whether or not it's effective, especially with the increase that we've seen in the amount that private attorneys are being paid, $125 an hour for cases that are not homicide cases and $175 an hour for the homicide cases. I think that is definitely something that needs to be looked at. And again, anecdotally, it looks like it could use at least one, maybe two more attorneys in that area to help with the caseload.
Secondly, in one sense, this is an administrative position as much as anything, but do you also intend to be in the courtroom, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think when I look at this job, I think it's approximately 75% administrative, 25% I think you need to be in the courtroom. And I think there's a number of reasons that the county attorney, the public defender needs to be in the courtroom. Chief among them is to be able to provide feedback to staff. I think that you have to cast the right shadow as a leader. And I think you have to be in the courtroom handling cases on some level to be able to do that. You have to know what the judges are doing, how they are sentencing clients, how their courtrooms are working, to be able to mentor and provide training to staff. I think also being able to see how your staff are interacting with judges and their clients and others who are part of the criminal justice system in the courtroom is very important to be able to provide coaching and feedback to those attorneys. And I think those are things that can only happen if you are in court on a somewhat regular basis. So I do believe that carrying, again, some level of caseload is very important.
And lastly, I want to sort of revisit the problem-solving court thing. You mentioned that it's kind of narrowly defined now as to who can get in. I am assuming you would be in favor of expanding that, but also are there other areas, other types of problem-solving courts, like say a mental health one, like don't they have one of those in Sarpy County at the moment, I believe? Do you think that's something that should be explored?
Yeah, and I think that's an area, again, this is where we have to reach across the aisle and work with other county agencies in order to be successful in doing this. We do have mental health diversion here, which I don't know if they have that in Sarpy County, but they have started the mental health problem-solving court there in Sarpy County. We do not have that here in Lancaster County yet, and I think that could play very well with our current mental health diversion programs. I do think that if we were to be able to look at expanding, I know that some of the issue, from my understanding, is being able to find enough providers to provide all the treatment that needs to happen when an individual gets into these courts. So being able to expand the provider lists and roles to allow people to enter into those courts, I think is an area that we need to work with the board on. And again, I think you have to reach across the aisle to get buy-in from all parties. The county attorney, the Supreme Court has to play a part in this too, because you have to have judges and to run these courts. And so this is something you have to get a lot of buy-in. It's not just something that one day somebody wakes up and says, oh, I think I'll start X court and we're going to get people in there. We have to have systems in place. We have to have buy-in from the people who are going to end up paying for it, which ultimately in this case is generally the county board, being able to work with the county attorney, and then again with the Supreme Court to get the judges assigned.
All right, Kent, are you done?
I'm done.
All right. So, Trevin, the last question we have for you is, what didn't we ask you that you wish we had?
Well, I think, when we look at organizations, when I was in the corporate world, we do what we call start, stop, and continue. So we look at, what are we going to start doing? What are we going to stop doing? And what are we going to continue to do? And that was something that we would do as part of kind of a process improvement that would happen at least annually. One of the things I think at the levels, a couple of changes that I would make if elected this position would be looking at the conflict cases, the way that the offices or the cases are kept there in the office. This is essentially a law firm, and one that the people of Lancaster County have already paid for. They put a retainer down, so to speak, when they have the $5 million come out of the budget to cover the salaries and the staff. So when I look at, I think it's the last 7 homicide cases that have went to trial. The public defender's office did not end up representing them. It was private attorneys. And as I spoke about, the private attorneys just saw an increase in the rate of pay. And this can have a huge impact in budgets. When looking at a recent case of Felipe Vasquez, the person who was convicted of killing Officer Mario Herrera, 2 very good private attorneys had that case, and their bill so far is $150,000 on that case alone. No qualms about how they handled the case. Again, very good attorneys. This is just the reality of what that costs. And this is something that's not included in the public defender's budget, but something they definitely can impact. There used to be a time when these big cases would come in with multiple defendants, and a call was made to the county attorney to find out, who was the most culpable, who was the most responsible, who do they think pulled the trigger. And that's the individual that the public defender's office would take, and the other cases then would be sent out to the private attorneys. And I think this is something that needs to start happening again. I think the other area, a couple other things, just briefly, professionalism, I think needs to take a priority on the administrative side. Our system is an adversarial system, but when it's not in the courtroom, we're still professionals. And I think, it's not about finger pointing or saying how bad the other side is. I think we need to come to the table with some ideas. And I'm not saying to give an inch on protecting anybody's constitutional rights or not acting in your client's best interest. Again, I think what we have to do is reach across the aisle to solve some of these problems that we're facing. And I don't know that that's been happening effectively for years. The final thing I'll just mention that I've been giving a lot of thought to, I think, is the caseloads. We touched on it earlier. Do we need another attorney? I think so. That's something that I have experience in and have done in the past, analyzing workloads and budgets and making the case of adding an additional employee when it makes sense. I would say as a whole that the attorneys and the staff at the public defender's office are top notch. And I know with the right leadership, this can be an exceptional office.
All right. Well, that sounds like a nice resolving note, Trevin. We appreciate your answers to our questions and the time you took today. And we wish you the best with your campaign.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.